I welcome you all to the 10th lecture for this course on International Investment Law and the environment. So, in this lecture, we will be looking at the response of capital importing countries to international minimum standard. I ended my last lecture by saying how newly independent countries started questioning the international minimum standard of treatment, because even when the capital exporting countries recognized the right of expropriation of the host states, they asked for compensation. The quantum of compensation is always disputed between capital importing countries and capital exporting countries, but compensation was paid. So, international minimum standard of treatment ensured that the compensation was paid to foreign investor. So, the newly independent countries started questioning why should an international minimum standard of treatment to aliens had to be given, right? So, the capital importing countries, which were mostly the developing countries, they rejected the international minimum standard of treatment to aliens. Rather, they wanted national treatment to be given. What is national treatment? They stated that they will give the same treatment that they are giving to their own nationals to the foreigners as well. But the advocates of international minimum standard of treatment wanted a higher status than what is being given to the nationals, and that is what they were demanding, and that is what they stated is an international minimum standard of treatment. So, here the developing countries, they sort of looked at international minimum standard of treatment as an increased protection given to foreign investors. So, when an increased protection is given to foreign investors and their investments, they perceived that to be an attack on their sovereignty. Basically, why should foreigners be treated in a better position than their own citizens? So, they felt it as an attack of the sovereignty, but the advocates of international minimum standard of treatment stated that wherever their nationals went, they carried their home state laws, and therefore they cannot be made subject to local laws of the host state. And they clearly stated that an international legal obligation that exists towards a foreign investor, that cannot be determined in reference to domestic laws. So, these were the arguments of the advocates of international minimum standard of treatment. Basically, they stated that increased protection has to be given to foreign investors, because when they bring their capital from their country to some other country, they have an increased risk and all of that. So, wherever they went, they they carried their home state laws, and the international legal obligation that exists towards them has to be only looked at from an international perspective, and not from the content of domestic laws. These were the arguments. Now, here we can better understand why the advocates of international minimum standard of treatment are asking for an increased protection for foreign investors than given to the nationals of the host state. From the words of Secretary of State Bayat, he had beautifully explained the US position with regard to why an international minimum standard of treatment had to be given to foreign investors. So, Secretary of State Bayat stated that if a government could set up its own municipal laws as the final test of its international rights and obligation, then the rules of international law would be but the shadow of a name and would afford no protection either to states or to individuals. So, it has been constantly maintained and also admitted by the government of the United States that a government cannot appeal to its municipal regulation as an answer to demands for the fulfillment of international duties. So, then what we see here is the application of international minimum standard of treatment sort of happened through the conclusion of many treaties by the capital exporting countries, and eventually this has even become a standard within international law as well, because many treaties that were concluded by capital exporting states, they wanted international minimum standard to be given. So, it had sort of took a place for itself within international law, but this was heavily contested by developing countries, especially by Latin American countries, especially by Argentina. So, So there was this Argentine jurist, Carlos Calvo. He very strongly advocated for national treatment even for foreign investors. His theory is very popular, that it's even referred to as Calvo doctrine. So since it's a very essential theory, I want to dedicate one whole segment for discussing about Calvo doctrine. So in the next segment, let us look at Calvo doctrine in detail. And the Calvo doctrine is the theory that was advocated by Carlos Calvo, an Argentine jurist. So we look at it in detail in the next segment. Thank you.